just take it as an extreme privilege to be able to share my voice. And with that privilege comes the responsibility when you have a platform to be educated on the issues, to be in close proximity with the issues as well, and to just basically know what's up and recognize that, like, I stand on the shoulders of so many people who have come before me, you know, and their voices and their stories matter.
All right, so to everyone that's listening that is inspired to invite Payton to speak, he's going to bring the fire when he comes.
So I think another really important issue for everybody at the table, and we've all, I think, balanced this in one way or another, is specifically the facet of intersectionality, right? That a simple category or a simple label doesn't define your identity, that you find yourself identifying with different things that are sometimes at odds with each other and sometimes very much on the same page, that they feel like a natural sort of connection between the two. So I wanted to ask both you, Terri, and you, Payton, have you ever felt at times that there was a greater weight for you placed on a specific facet of your identity, or have you learned to sort of keep all of those things in balance of each other?
I definitely think that there is a certain pressure from some people to prioritize one over any other, but that's not something that I can do, even if it's something that I wanted to do. My identities are not something that I can really untether from each other. And this makes me think about a conversation I had with someone who they were asking about why is identifying as queer so difficult, especially like if you're a Black person, like why should I care so much about the fact that you're both of them? And his sort of idea was, well, when I walk out the door, people can see my Blackness. They can't really see your queerness. Like, you can just hide that. So why isn't race more important? And I think he really just didn't understand that it's not something that's separate, nor is it something that can be hidden. And I think just people understanding identities as separate is, I don't know, it's hard for me to really understand what the logic behind that is, especially because they inform each other so much. And I think for me, the reason I identify as queer is because I understand queerness as an identity that has sort of historically been relegated as other or different or deviant. And so that sort of encompasses everything. And so it's not just about sexual orientation. It could be about gender expression. It could be about race. It can be about a number of things. And so when I'm thinking about queerness, I am thinking about all of those identities in one.
I definitely feel the same way. I almost feel weird now identifying to anything, because I'm just like, there's so many different things that define me, but also don't define me. I love the terminology of queerness because I love how it kind of confuses people, because they're just like, well, what does it even mean? And I'm like, exactly. Yeah. What does it even mean? Like, it means that I'm different, but aren't we all different, right? But I think as it relates to these specific identities, I think that I often find myself in Black spaces really making sure that people understand the importance of acknowledging queerness, and that we exist, and that we are here, and that we're not going anywhere, that we've always been here. For people who think that it's this new phenomenon that is like government agenda to like ruin Black men or whatever it is, we've always been here. And then for, I guess the other side of that too is being in white spaces, where sometimes queerness is a little bit less stigmatized, especially in academia. But you often find that these people who have experienced otherness that has been hurtful, and I don't downplay anybody's experience with experiencing what it means to be like thrown out of your home, what it means to not be loved by somebody in your family, or be a victim of violence or whatever because of like how you identify. But oftentimes we perpetuate that on other people's. And I don't know if you all followed closely this weekend what happened at Progress Bar up in Boys Town, where they basically said after an incident that they're not going to play rap music anymore. The name of the bar is Progress, right?
Ironic.
And it shows, and that's one of the reasons why, for me, you know, a lot of people look at Chicago as this like very incredible liberal city, and that the fact that we have a whole district of our city that's dedicated to queerness and queer identities, but we often say like, hey, like you have this space, go there. Like it's supposed to be for everybody queer, but we don't often understand that there are underlying nuances to how you identify and things that you can't change about yourself, such as race. Where people do make sure that you don't feel comfortable in a place, or make sure that you feel ostracized. And I think that it's now more than ever, it's time to kind of have these conversations as we talk about like, what does it mean to truly be inclusive, especially within the queer community? Because honestly, I felt more discrimination within the queer community than I felt within the Black community for my queer identity. When oftentimes people are just like, oh, well, Black folk are homophobic due to like religion and church or whatever, all that kind of stuff. So it's been really, really fascinating, like, to just see how my identities have developed over and over time, and to think about situations like that, what happened up north, and the importance of Black queer people having their space and celebrating each other and learning about themselves and learning to love themselves despite what anybody has to say, white or Black, to them. So as I look at like these different identities that oftentimes can be at war with each other, or oftentimes like one gets touted over the other, it takes me back to one experience I had in Missouri, and I was being interviewed by one of the radio stations there, and somebody asked me, they were just like, well, how do you feel like you're advocating for, Black issues on your campus? And this school I think it was when they had allowed students at one of the elementary schools to identify as trans. And so the issue of like transgender bathrooms and all that kind of stuff was coming up. And they were just like, how do you feel that these issues are progressing over the Black issues? And I was just like, you must not have like read up on me or what, but these issues go hand in hand with each other. There is no separation for us. We don't get to choose to say like, I'm not this one day, I'm gonna be that one day, and I think that's the whole importance of intersectionality in general. The fact is just like, you can't choose to advocate one without advocating for the other. Some people can. And I think that's where we're getting to having conversations like this. Like, what is the role of like those with extreme privilege within the queer community? White, gay, cisgender men, like, what are you going to do about this? When are you going to speak out about issues of racism? So, and I think that can be applied to most social justice issues.
I think also like important to that discussion is thinking about Kathy Cohen's theory of secondary marginalization and like that experience that you had when they were asking about how these trans issues were sort of overshadowing Black issues. And it's just like this idea that even in a marginalized community, even within the Black community, you have, issues of those who are further marginalized that don't really become salient to the entire group. So that's why Black queer issues or Black trans issues might not seem, as much on the forefront as if we're just looking at race. And I think like that's sort of the issue behind all of this that we're talking about now. And that's what's really propelling like that pressure to prioritize one over the other.
And I think also too, like related to that, a lot of people don't know how intersectional the movements have always been, just because based off of like people's identities in general. Like even when you talk about Black Lives Matter, the ones who technically coined the term, the hashtag, were 3 Black queer women. Mm-hmm. Even the movement that started at my university, which is what I speak about a lot of times, it was MU for Mike Brown, started by 3 Black queer women. So oftentimes it's just like, oh, well, these issues are so black, and they have no relation to the queer community and all that other kind of stuff. No, you literally have Black queer women who have always been leading the charge for all of these different issues, who have been the mother of all of these different movements. Mm-hmm. You have Stonewall, the movie that came out like featuring some white man, when we don't acknowledge, like, even with that, like, Black and brown queer women were leading the charge. So I think that it's important that we have this conversation about, like, what does all this advocacy even mean? Because it's all, like, on the backs of one group that has been advocating for everybody. And when is it going to be time for us to advocate for them?
Awesome. This has been a really, really impactful conversation. I thank you guys so much for sharing your perspectives with us. I think this was a conversation that we need more of here at the university. And I think that by making sure super awesome, bright, capable, and engaged leaders like yourself are at the center of these conversations is really, really important. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. This has been Kinda Sorta Brown. This has been your co-host, Kurt Nugent.
Rei Bertoldi.
And I'm James Johnson.
And again, I'd love to thank our awesome guests, Terri and Payton, for joining us today. And also, it happens at the end of every episode. Shout out to the amazing team here at Kinda Sorta Brown. So shout out to engineer, mixmaster Izzy. Shout out to Olive. And shout out to Eduardo and the whole rest of the team at UC3P for letting us do what we do.
Tune in next time.